Welcome back, everybody. I really hope you're doing well and that you're blessed. I'm making this video today. I mentioned in my last video that I'd had a short but powerful warning dream that I need to share urgently. So I'm doing that today. I've been praying about it since I made my last video and really seeking the Lord as to how and what I should share. So I've done my best. So the dream was as follows. I'd gone back to the school I used to work at, and I was trying to help and support the staff who were there. I'd been asked to prepare 3 cups of coffee for some staff members. Now, that obviously should normally be a really quick and easy thing to do, but I struggled with it for hours. I had to put some sort of special, I think it was like hazelnut flavouring to flavour the coffee. And I was really struggling to get it right. And I had to boil up and froth the milk to make a sort of a cappuccino type frothy topping for the coffee. And I had to use one of those industrial milk boilers. I've seen this done with one of these things here like this. I've never actually used one myself, so I didn't know how it worked, and I was really struggling to make the frothy milk. And it all took so long that I began to wonder if the people I was supposed to be serving had actually drifted off. And I knew it was urgent that I had to get these ready by the latest at 1 o'clock. Excuse me. Or it would be too late. So I asked the Lord what this was supposed to mean. I'm not a coffee drinker, so it's not something I would normally dream about. And when I prayed, this is what came to me. So the question came to me, what is coffee really all about? And well, it's a wake-up drink. So since God first called me to be a watchwoman 2 years ago, the message he has asked me to share have very much been that. They've been wake-up messages for the church primarily, to wake up and repent and to get the right relationship with the Lord as he's coming back very soon. It's been urgent for 2 years, so it must be even more urgent now. I've had to warn about the different ways in which the church has been in sin, very much along the lines of the warnings given by the Holy Spirit to the church in the first book of Revelation. I've had to warn people of the predictive programming of the Antichrist beast system and the fact that the time of the Antichrist world order system is at the very door. So these have been often directly for Christians, and if you are a Christian and if you are sitting on the fence a bit about things, or your relationship with the Lord is not as it should be, I would strongly recommend you go back and listen to these warnings, please. But they're not also just for Christians, because the world events that are unfolding are going to affect everybody on this planet. So I believe what the Lord was saying to me in this dream is that I'm being called to serve others by issuing warnings to wake up, but that it can be a bitter message, like coffee is a bitter drink. I had to ask myself, perhaps I've been trying too hard to make the message palatable and pleasing to the taste, and perhaps I've taken too long struggling over trying to do that, and hence the struggles to add the pleasant hazelnut flavouring, or perhaps I've spent too long just adding in additional froth, and if I have, forgive me. Sort of in the same way as I've been trying to add in something to make it taste pleasant, to make the message more attractive and more appealing. So perhaps I just need to spell out the simple, unadulterated, bitter warnings without beating about the bush or trying to be a people pleaser. So perhaps this message is for you in that sense, if you're a pastor or a teacher or just an ordinary person like me who wants desperately to share the gospel with others. Perhaps you need the boldness to speak out the truth, however bitter it may seem, without dressing it up. Excuse me. Or perhaps you think you know the truth, or perhaps you're trying to uncover the truth. So what is this bitter truth that God is wanting to wake people up to? Well, I asked him for further clarification, and I heard, what does the Bible say? Well, this is a very big question, because obviously it says a lot. But as I pray, I felt that the Lord wants me to wake people up to the truth of the Bible, especially in these challenging times that we're living in, that there are many of you out there who will not even begin to consider the Bible as truth because of the viewpoints that you have adopted over time. What I want to say today is to encourage you and even to challenge you to be really honest and to at least think about considering a different viewpoint, please, before you just throw the baby out with the bathwater. So please hear me out. I would so appreciate it if you would. So my point is, whenever we look at life, we can find ourselves looking at it through a particular lens. So I thought I'd give some thought to what these lenses might be. So perhaps you might look through life through the lens of what mainstream science teaches. Or you might look through the lens of religious tradition. Or you might be looking through the lens of the media, or the lens of a particular political worldview. Another word for this, which you probably already know, would be a paradigm, and that is defined as, we can see here, a framework containing the basic assumptions, ways of thinking and methodology that are commonly accepted by members of a scientific community, as it happens to be here, not just scientific, of course. But this word assumption is an interesting and a very relevant word. It's also described here as a philosophical and theoretical framework of a scientific school or discipline within which theories, laws, generalizations and so forth are formulated. So you have this framework within which you formulate these things or generalizations, or you carry out experiments. Sorry, I'm inventing words now. Now, it may not matter in the grand scheme of things, the fact that I look at something is different from the way that you do. For instance, I happen to believe, just as an example now, in life after death. You may not, and this can remain personal belief until one view or another becomes a framework which, as we've read, is commonly assumed as fact, or within which theories and laws are formulated, which underpin what is presented as scientific truth or political order. So I looked first at, just as an example now, I'm not going to go into this in detail, but just as an example of an illustration of what I'm trying to talk about, the lens of political and philosophical thought. So in that context, we might think about I've missed something here. I beg your pardon. We might think about this, about the theories of Karl Marx. This is just taken straight out of Wikipedia. And you can read this for yourself, how the writings of Karl Marx and others, how these influenced political changes throughout the last century and the setting up of a very wide geographical areas of governments and states which were based upon atheism, which introduced state atheism. So at this point, we've actually moved beyond personal view to the imposition of one group of people's worldview onto other groups of people's worldview, removing freedom of choice and freedom of thought and freedom of conscience. And very often, of course, as we know from history, resulting in incarceration and death, and it still goes on now. And to be fair, this doesn't have to just refer to atheism, because of course there's a wealth of shameful history of similar action being taken by those purporting to believe in a god or gods, not least, for example, the Spanish Inquisition or the Crusades. Moving on now, I'd like to look at politics and the media, or politics and government through this lens, especially because it's, the media and government, beg your pardon, especially this is probably what most of us are listening to a lot at the moment because of the pandemic. Most of us find ourselves isolated behind our closed doors during this lockdown. And we may consider we have little choice but to look at events through the lens of the media and the information as it's presented to us by our government. So let's consider this. Now, I have no political axe to grind here at all. I personally, however, have been really confused about the fact that there is conflicting and seriously conflicting information out there. And here's some examples. These are some videos. This is standard mainstream news, which was showing people outside Elmhurst, Queens, New York hospital. And I believe this was within the same 24 hours that somebody else went and made a video that looked very, very different. I'm just saying this is what's out there. This is eyewitness evidence. So here you can see the links if you wish to go and inspect this for yourself. So my question is, how are we as ordinary people supposed to know what's truly going on now or at any other time if the evidence is contradictory? I'm not making a political statement here. I'm just challenging you to think about who or what are reliable sources providing us with the truth. Thinking also about the facts around the reported number of cases or deaths from COVID-19. So here we have some information which calls into question the reliability of the figures that we are being given. So here we have a doctor, pardon me, who is speaking of receiving a 7-page document instructing him to record people on death certificates as having died from COVID-19 when the links were extremely tenuous at best. So you can watch that for yourself, and I'm sure there's lots of other similar videos out there. And here's a document that was sent out by the CDC, the Center for Disease Control in the US, giving guidance for certifying COVID-19 deaths. And I will give you the link. You can see that it says about how to record this, that COVID-19 should be recorded on the death certificate if it is assumed to have caused or contributed to death. Well, what if you've got 3 other things that contributed to death? And we have to make clear, even if we put down something else like SARS or COVID-2, that we have to state that it's the COVID-19 coronavirus strain. So that has to be recorded. And this has to be put in causal pathway leading to death part 1. And if they had other chronic conditions that may also have contributed, these are relegated in part 2. They can be reported in part 2, which I'm assuming is secondary. So if statistics are being slanted, and I don't know what other conclusion to arrive at, then why are they being slanted? If statistics are unreliable, this obviously calls into question decisions that are being made that affect us all that are based on these statistics. So part of that data would include examining actually just how deadly this disease really is. So here's an article that was published in the, there you are, there's the link for you. This is an article that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine by Dr. Anthony Fauci, who may well be somebody you've heard of. He's chief advisor to the US government and the president at the moment on these matters. And this is a peer-reviewed document publication. And you can see here, he's talking about the severity of COVID-19. He says, if one assumes that the number of asymptomatic or minimally symptomatic cases is several times as high as the number of reported cases, the case fatality rate may be considerably less than 1%. This suggests, and it's been touted as being much higher, 2 or 3 or above. This suggests that the overall clinical consequences of COVID-19 may ultimately be more akin to those of a severe seasonal influenza, which has a case fatality rate of approximately 0.1%. Well, if this disease is truly more akin to regular or even, let's say, severe seasonal flu, then why are such extreme measures being put in place? I mean, I can understand that we need to protect the NHS as we're being exhorted to do, because we want to protect them from being overwhelmed. I can totally get that. But as I say, if this disease's mortality rate does not exceed that of seasonal flu, then why are such extreme measures being put in place when these have never been implemented for the comparable seasonal flu? I don't understand this. And by the same token, why on earth would you call for a one world government to tackle this? I'm speechless. And why would it be necessary to introduce mandatory vaccines? That we can't go back to normal without vaccine. I don't get this. And some of these may well involve tracking and certification. We know Bill Gates is involved in all of this. And so he says here, that's the spirit of Gavi, which is one of his groups, which is getting vaccines out to every person. Why? We can read this here. This is about the certification. The certificate lets individuals prove and request proof from others that they've recovered from the new coronavirus, having tested positive, so we've got the testing, for antibodies, or having received a vaccination, so we've tested or we've been vaccinated once it is available. Former Microsoft boss Bill Gates asking for digital test certificates during a Reddit AMA last month said eventually we will have some digital certificates to show who has recovered or been tested recently, or when we have a vaccine, who has received it. I find this really concerning. If things are really no worse than a severe seasonal flu, why may we be required to submit to this? I'm thinking of basic human rights here. And here's an article that shows some of the technology that's being developed and considered for this purpose, which is discussed in one of the video links that I will share later on. And you can see this is a sensor that is put under the skin, a hydrogel sensor. It has two parts, a string of hydrogel exerted under the skin, beg your pardon, with a syringe. And it sends a fluorescent signal outside the body when the body begins to fight an infection. The other part is an electronic component attached to the skin, sends light through the skin, detects the signal, generates another signal that the wearer can send to a doctor, and so forth. I mean, wow. The flu? So the question is, are the statistics we are being given reliable? I'm just asking you to consider this. Are the politicians and the media trustworthy? Is testing and vaccination necessary or even helpful? Well, for myself, because all the information I'm being given is contradictory, I don't know the answer to all these things. And that's kind of my point. So to return to my initial question, what is the truth, or even what is truth? What about looking at life, reality, events through the lens of the Bible? And again, I'm saying, please don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater, but bear with me. Because I've already discussed above how observing science and history through the lens of the Bible records is highly consistent with observable archaeological and scientific data. As further clear evidence of its supernatural authorship, we find, for example, to give you an example here, that a description of a king, including his name and his actions, was written and recorded in the book of Isaiah 150 years before the actual king was born. You can read this for yourself. So, if the Bible can be shown to be historically and scientifically credible, and if its author could predict the future in detail, surely this deserves our attention. If it's reliable, truthful, and prophetically accurate, as in the example of, this is just one example of prophetic accuracy, can it be a lens worth using today to help us to interpret where we find ourselves in history and perhaps what lies at the door? I want to examine just a couple of relevant scriptures, starting with Matthew chapter 24. So this is what Jesus said 2,000 years ago. Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And he answers them, and he says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars." Well, we have, and we do. "See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places." Well, we have, and we do. But the point is that actually we are the first and only generation in history to see everything that Jesus described unfolding before our eyes, unfolding at the same time, and with the intensity and the level of incidence that has never been witnessed before. So please think about that. What does that tell us? If Jesus knew these things were going to happen, and he told us that these things would happen, and they're happening now, simultaneously and with great intensity, what does that tell us about perhaps how we ought to listen up to the one who knew these things would happen? So that's just Matthew 24. But there's also, of course, the book of Revelation, which is, to say the very least, difficult to interpret. And if you want to be able to interpret it, or to go some way towards interpreting it, personally, and this is just personal, I highly recommend the teacher who made this video here. He's a teacher on the topic. His website is DTBM, I think it's Discover the Book Ministry, and he spent 10 years studying Revelation for his PhD. And he is a clear and a very humble Bible teacher, and very easy to listen to. So I highly recommend him. Here are some of his teaching videos on the books of Revelation. And here's some more links for you to check him out. Dr. John Barnett. So I'm going to look at just one prophecy in the book of Revelation. So this is from the book of the Revelation chapter 13, and we read in the book of Revelation chapter 13 about a beast rising up out of the sea, and the sea often represents a symbolic of people or nations or multitudes of people. That's in verse 1. And authority is given to him over every tribe, every tongue, every nation, in verse 7. So that includes all of us, that includes you. And this is often taken to represent Satan, this first beast. And then from verse 12 onwards, we read about another beast rising up. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he causes the earth and those who dwell in it, so us, to worship the first beast, that's Satan, whose deadly wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire to come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, the first beast, and to cause as many as would not worship the beast or the image of the beast to be killed. So if we are in those times when this is going to come about, because Jesus said this, and we are the first generation to observe all of this, and the only generation to observe all of this, then I think we should be listening to Jesus and perhaps looking at things through the lens of the Bible. So this person is given authority and power by Satan to perform these amazing signs and wonders that deceive people into trusting him or believing him to be some sort of Messiah. And it goes on from verse 16 to say, he causes all, both great, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, that's all, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that in the King James it says in their right hand or in their forehead, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, which is the number of a man. His number is 666, which of course is something which is well known about worldwide, with or without a religious context. Well, I've wondered about this since I remember reading this in 1977 at the age of 16, as I sat and I read this, and I sat there trying to work out what the 666 could mean. And it wasn't until 2 years ago that God woke me up, although I've been a Christian a long time. He woke me up with these words. They came as a great shock to me. When he spoke this, he said to me, "It is the time of the fulfillment of all things." And you can believe I have watched very closely since then. So how could this be interpreted? Well, it's not until now that the technology is extant that could bring this about. Think about these trackers and these things that they want to put, this hydrogel under our skin, digital certificates and so forth. That may be, it may not, but the point is that the technology exists now, and it's never existed before in human history to bring this about. So as I say, is it this? Is it now? My honest answer is I don't know. But given that it's possible, I think we need to watch very closely and consider very closely the lens that we are watching events unfold through. So I will, as I say, attach other links to other YouTubes that I've found have provided some serious food for thought in these matters. Here's one. There's several here. This guy, Rashid, is a doctor, Rashid Buttar, and this one here. And you may find them helpful too. You don't have to watch them, but I'm thinking they might be helpful to you. So just so you know, only one of the three of these videos is prepared by Christians. The other two have no religious affiliation that I can ascertain. But two of the speakers are doctors. And the Christian video is prepared by people who have been involved with and or worked for both the CIA and FEMA, and the interviewee is a medical doctor. And you can make up your own mind, but I found them helpful and worth watching. They're certainly food for thought. So I have to say that if you know Jesus Christ as your personal saviour, there is absolutely nothing to worry about here. His word, the Bible, reminds us that our life is hid with Christ in God, and that our times are in his hands. And there are many great and precious promises in his word. I can honestly say, I am not worried, I am not frightened, I am not afraid. If I get the coronavirus and die today, I am not worried because I know where I'm going. And I'm not worried about the machinations of governments, one world or otherwise, because I know God, and I know how the book ends, if you like. But the point is exactly that. Without him, then the bitter truth is that the future as portrayed in the Bible is nothing short of terrifying. This has been a very difficult video for me to prepare because I don't like to offend anyone. This is my fault and this is my weakness. For the sake of truth and out of love, I've had to say the things that I have said. I care too much not to say it. I said the truth may be bitter, but there's no use disguising it with froth and flavouring. The purpose of the bitter drink is to get people to wake up. And I'm trying to the best of my ability to do that today with this video. So which lens will you choose to look through? The lens of mainstream science? The lens of religious tradition? The lens of politics and the media? Or even the rose-coloured lens of seeing the world the way that you want to see it? Or even, perhaps, this. Just to go back to my dream briefly, I said that I had to do this by 1 o'clock. I had to finish it by 1 o'clock. And There's only one instance in the Bible of 1 o'clock, and this is in John 4, 52, and it's described as being the seventh hour. This is how Jewish people told the time, as the seventh hour. And in the Bible, numbers have meaning, and you can read here about the number 7. It's to do with perfection and completion, completeness. It's written by the Hebrew letter Zayin, and it means completion, spiritual perfection. It says here 7 is the biblical number of completion and spiritual perfection. As such, Psalm 7 speaks of the 2 floods by which the earth is cleansed and brought to the perfect order of the kingdom. It's interesting that it's in Psalm 7 it speaks of the floods, because that was to do with destruction and the end of the world order as it was known at the time, and judgment on that world order. As we know, 7 days completes a Sabbath cycle, a weekly cycle. And in Revelation 10:7, the mystery of God is finished when the 7th angel blows his trumpet. In Revelation 16:7, it is done when the 7th angel pours out the 7th vial into the air. 7 is the number of completion. It's done, pretty much done. I have to get this message out to you for you to please wake up before it gets to 1 o'clock, the 7th hour, the end, before it's too late. Thank you for watching this far. So I have to ask you though, will you continue with your accustomed lens or lenses, or will you take a fresh look through the lens of God's Word, the Bible, and be illuminated with its glorious light before it is too late? There has never been a more urgent time to wake up to the truth, not just any truth, but the truth. Jesus, you can meet the truth. Jesus says that he is the truth. You don't just have to know the truth as an idea. You can know him in person. God describes us as sinners in the book he wrote, in his truth, which is a bitter truth that none of us wants to hear. Yet we have to acknowledge that if we can't even live up to our own standards of morality, which might include perhaps lying or stealing or selfishness or impatience, any of those things, we can't live up to that ourselves, and we certainly cannot live up to God's. But he promises us that because he has already taken the punishment for those sins when he became a man and died punished for crimes he didn't commit, which he chose to do, to stand in our place and receive God the Father's punishment for us, if you will accept that as a free gift and give your life over to him, you can be forgiven for it all and receive everlasting life. It's free and it's available to you right now. So it's up to you how you choose to go to God. The best kind of prayer is for you to get on your knees yourself and with your own words. Acknowledge that he's right and you're wrong, and that you are not perfect and you don't know everything, and that you have sinned, that you have done things that are wrong. You couldn't possibly muscle your way in to heaven by your own righteousness, because you have sinned, you have told lies, you have taken things that didn't belong to you, you've been cruel. I don't know what it happens to be. Or worse, there's no sin that is too dark or too bad, no sin that is too dark or too evil that cannot be forgiven, because he paid the price for them all on the cross. So the best way is for you to get on your knees and say, I believe you, God. I believe your word. I believe you are honest and true and trustworthy. I believe you are my creator. I believe my existence is in your hands. My fate is in your hands. And I believe that because I've sinned, I am not worthy to be in your presence. But I believe also that you sent Jesus, Yeshua, to die, to be my Messiah, my Mashiach, my Saviour, whatever you want to call him, to take my place, to die for my sins, to take my punishment, so that I can be forgiven and accepted and cleansed and healed and delivered and received and adopted as your son. This is just an example of some words you can pray. The best thing you can do is get on your knees yourself and ask God directly in your own words. So I want to say, please do this. Please ask him while there is still time. And remember, it was so close to 1 o'clock in my dream. Time is running out. Please do it soon. Thank you so much for watching.